We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. This is going to be a fun one for all of you out there in Radiolandia. I must say that I was not the largest Todd Rundgren, a Utopia fan. It was a little older for me at that point, but about 15 years ago, late at night, I was up watching live from Daryl's house in beautiful Kauai, and then I went into a rabbit's hole. I saw one of the greatest performances I've ever seen. Still to this day, I recommend it. You couldn't just YouTube it or Google it 15 years ago. You can find it now. It wouldn't have made any difference. Todd Rundgren on the live from Daryl's house, and he's coming this week for my birthday on Sunday night. Be appearing up in York, Pennsylvania at the Appell Center. Places I've seen a lot of great acts. They have a lot of great shows up in York, Pennsylvania, and they have made available the great Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. It is a bucket list and an honor to have you on, Todd Rundgren. How are you? It really is a pleasure to have you aboard.
I'm surviving out here. We're in mid tour, and we got a little break today, but I just did a couple in a row, and that makes my voice a little foggier than normal. But some people say it's sexy, so
Well, whatever gets you to the stage. I mean, first things first, you do a lot of touring, man. And I've seen your home, right? And I know Tiki Bar. I've Googled you, man. I've become fascinated with you in my adulthood and feeling like I missed some stuff back in the 70s and 80s. But you're out being relevant. I saw you on stage within the last 2 years with my friend Tom Dolby down at Ram's Head doing that amazing Bowie night that you did. And now I get a chance to really sit down and see a couple dozen songs. So, what keeps you out on the road at this point?
well, it is my vocation, I guess. I used to I used to make a pretty good living as a record producer, but that whole scene has sort of changed as well as the record labels have fallen out of the picture. Let's say people don't depend on labels as much as they used to, and that has a lot to do with advancing technology, being able to make records in your bedroom and that sort of thing. And so the demand for the kind of production that I used to do is not as prevalent as a team of producers. It seems like nowadays, if you look at the production credits on a song, it might be five songwriters and three producers for everything. It's a very calculated scientific thing nowadays to get airplay. So I'm not as much of a producer as I used to be, and that means I have a lot of time to go on the road. uh, and it's pretty much how I make my living now, so I can't stop.
Is it a physical art form for you, though? I mean, you've done so much studio work. There is a point where you're going to be in front of me and a couple thousand people in York, Pennsylvania on Sunday night. That especially after the plague, right, where we were all sort of cooped up, and I'm watching folks like you, really creative people, make music from their homes that was unique unto itself. But that just made me want to get back out, especially the last couple of years, and visit with folks that are getting younger like you and do it in person.
Well, there's never been a real substitute for that, particularly in an age where people are afraid that everything they see is a product of AI. And one thing you can say is if you go to a live show, those are actual real people up there on the stage, usually, unless it's craft work. But that's kind of it's reassuring, I guess, for people to be able to be in the same room as someone who's creating something, making music, or seeing a play or something like that. All of the sort of the artifactual media like film and recorded music and things like that, that's ultimately manipulated in some way. So if you want the real pure thing, you go out to a show somewhere and watch people do it in real time.
What do you make of an old guy like me that was I was a music critic at the Baltimore Sun in the late 80s. I've interviewed every Daryl Hall, every John, all these people that you're connected with. Meat Loaf and I were friends, and I'll get to that at some point. But I really, late at night, that that Daryl Hall show came on, and most of the time it was in his little barn up in New York, and buddies would come by and they'd make food and have wine and do all that. You did like the whole luau thing, but more than that, the music you made in your home, and I've had Greg Hawkes, one of your old bandmates in the New Cars, on, and talking about your home and how beautiful it was. It made me want to go to Hawaii, Todd. I mean, like it was a gateway that evening. It must have been 2 o'clock in the morning. Was on late at night, VH1, whatever, years ago that I saw you doing it, and it was a gateway to your music. And maybe that's what you hope when you set that up. And Daryl's hoping that at that point. But it's really made me discover you in a way that we're together here now, because I still think that session and the way it was shot in your home, indoor, outdoor, is just some really, really beautiful music. And I'm a Hall & Oates fan from way back.
Well, it's funny. I get recognized in airports and things by complete strangers who wouldn't know who I was, but for the fact that they saw that show, that one particular show. That was the second Daryl's house that I did. The first one was at his old barn up in Connecticut. I don't know whether that's still there or whether he still does shows there, but that was the first time we did it together. And then Daryl had been touring in Japan and thought, why don't I stop at Todd's house on the way home? And, Kauai is a small island. We usually don't do productions like that, bringing in a whole crew. And they essentially took over my whole house. The bedrooms became control rooms and things like that. And it took a day to set everything up. But
Don't
the
you
end
love
result,
that though, that it's unique? Don't you love the uniqueness of it, that you remember it as a one of a kind thing?
yeah, and that's what I mean. I think the whole setting of it, the material that we chose, the way it was shot, um, seems to have had a sort of a memorable effect on people. And so they don't even know who I am, but they'll see me, for instance, in an airport and they'll say, I saw you on Daryl's house. And I think, boy, that was a great investment, to have that at my house, because a lot of people who wouldn't have remembered maybe in another context, they that particular show, not just the fact that it was part of Daryl's regular programming, but he rarely did anything outside of his barn, out of the studio in Connecticut. So it was an interesting thing, an experiment, I guess, in some senses, because I don't know that he had ever done a show outside of his house. And it just worked out really well, I think, for not only from the content standpoint. It's more than Daryl's house. We were able to use the outdoors as well. We had our little luau thing, and we had fire dancers and stuff. So we were able to add that aspect of it. It was kind of indoors for a little bit, and then it was outdoors, and gave everybody kind of a better sense of what the place is like.
Well, Todd Rundgren is our guest. I'm not going to go James Lipton and read all the credits from Utopia, straight on through. But I only have 20, 25 minutes with you, and I have all the Clark Judge's questions. He's your biggest fan, so I'll get to that in a minute. But Meat Loaf and Paradise and Bat Out of Hell and Phil Rizzuto and my last name's Aparicio. I come from a baseball family, Todd. I know you have a baseball family as well. I can't have you in without talking a little baseball, and about your efforts with Meat Loaf all these years later, that something that you took as on some, almost 50 years ago, right? As a job has become something that really became an iconic thing, and something that I think of you every time I listen to it.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that the revenue that I sold in the 90s, I sold my points on Bat Out of Hell to the record label. And I took that money and I bought the place in Hawaii where I live. So Meat Loaf, essentially, there's a connection there between the two. The unexpected benefit of doing the Meat Loaf record, and then the fact that I could later turn that into essentially my the last place I'm going to live.
Do you ever listen to it? I mean, do you? Because I mean, there's been times that people have talked to you about it, and it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing. Do you listen to it and think of it as great art that you were involved in?
Well, I haven't sat down and listened to the whole thing, but on occasions I will hear, one of the tunes. Um, the funny thing is, or, I've told this story several times, but by the time Meat Loaf and Jim Steinman auditioned for me, they'd been turned down by everybody. I was kind of like the last resort. And I heard the record as a spoof of Bruce Springsteen. And that's the reason why I decided to do it. I thought it was going to be, and it is in some ways, a comedy record. It's there are a lot of funny moments in there, and Jim Steinman, he puts them in there on purpose. But he also, Jim is the mastermind behind the music on Bat Out of Hell. And a lot of it came from a project that he had in mind. So that he wanted to do as a Broadway musical. So that's what kind of why he hooked up with Meat Loaf, because Meat Loaf had been on Broadway doing the Rocky Horror Show, and Steinman had been working at the Public Theater, the New York Shakespeare Festival in New York, and he just had this project that was a retelling of Peter Pan, and it was called The Lost Boys. And so a lot of the material on the first Meat Loaf album and some of it on subsequent albums was music that he had written for a musical. And that's why it comes off a little different than other records, because the songs are just like half of them are just these production numbers where you could imagine dancers, and things like that, all kinds of effects and set changes. And that's the way Jim Steinman wanted it. He wanted it to come off as a very stagey kind of thing, and something that was more than simply a collection of songs, but a manifesto in a way of world conquest. And in the end, they succeeded. I didn't expect it to be as popular as it was. And I think they were just hoping to get the record released so that they could get on the road and play it. But no one had any idea that it would be that big.
Well, I befriended Meat Loaf in the 90s through my radio show and his love of baseball and the Yankees. And Mike Messina's brother was a partner of mine in the early 90s. And I got to know Meat. And I was in Phoenix at a Super Bowl, and they did Paradise on stage. And a local radio jock stood on stage and did the Rizzuto part and nailed it. And afterward, I was with Meat Loaf on his crazy tour bus, and he was coming through Merriweather Post Pavilion. And I said, and that was amazing. That was the greatest thing. He said, you should try to do it. You can't do it, but you should try to do it. And over 6 months, he made fun of me on the air. He invited me down to Merriweather to do the part during a sound check. The whole band was out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I could not do it. I mean, reading the Rizzuto part a lot harder than you think. But I hear you have a Rizzuto thing, and this will take us into your baseball thing, because a lot of folks don't know you have a baseball family as well.
It turned out that way. It wasn't a plan that we had. Um, my oldest son, back when he was like he's maybe a freshman in high school, and he was playing on the baseball team, and the school actually didn't. It used to be the sports coaches in a school team would also be teachers. They usually be like a shop teacher, something like that, and he would be the football coach. But they didn't have the budget for that. They couldn't pay teachers extra to do those extracurricular activities, so they had to do like fundraising and hire outside. So the team, Mount Tamalpais in Marin County, um, they hired a guy who was a professional ball player. He used to play for the Mets, and he was a catcher. And so he knew what the game was really like. It wasn't like the shop teacher teaching you baseball. And I went to pick up my oldest son, Rex, one day from practice, and the coach called me into the field house and he said, I want to talk to you. And I thought, oh God, he's in trouble now. you know? And the coach said, if he's got the softest hands I've ever seen in a kid his age. And that made me freaked out too, because I didn't know what that meant, you know. So he said, he just has this natural way of catching the ball and in one motion, throwing it to the basement because he was playing shortstop. And he said if he wanted to, he could be a professional bass player if he wanted to work hard and do that. And that's our lives suddenly changed at that point. And we had to learn about baseball. He got drafted out of high school.
So you
Um,
weren't a Phillies fan. You weren't Mike Schmidt and like all of that in the 70s and 80s. No.
Never paid any attention to baseball at all. No,
Wow.
I
Okay.
thought it was just the most boring game. And now that he doesn't play baseball anymore, I think it's a boring game again. But while he was playing baseball, I would go to all the games and yell at the umpires and just like a regular baseball fan. So he played for 11 years. Now he's completely out of the game. Uh, his brother, his younger brother, 5 years younger, Randy, coaches baseball now. So baseball is still part of our, family makeup in a way, if only because our middle son is teaching it to other kids.
Now, I had the Scooter on the show many years ago, back in the 90s, before he went in the Hall of Fame and all of that. How did that happen with Meat Loaf? And obviously, if you read through, you can't have a squeeze play with two men on and the bases loaded, like the whole deal. But the notion that Rizzuto would get involved and read, to your point, a comedy part almost in trying to score with a girl. And I don't know that Rizzuto knew that when he was reading it.
No, I don't think he did. He just, we weren't, playing the track while he was reading it. We just had him read it, and then we
There was no
laid it,
stop right there.
then we laid it into the track later. Yeah, we heard that, when he found out, he was a bit upset about it, but um, I, not knowing anything about baseball, I only knew Scooter Rizzuto from the money store commercials. So, I had never listened to him call a game, so I didn't know what any of that was about. I didn't know that he had played at one point, but he was just Phil Rizzuto for the money store to me. And so when Steinman, when he became, Steinman agreed to pay him $5,000 just to read that.
It's a
And
lot of money in 1975, right? That was a hell of a lot of your budget.
well, he got paid more than anybody. And at that point, I was still underwriting the cost of the record. The day before we went into the studio, Meat Loaf had a label, and we rehearsed for 2 weeks to go into the studio and do the album substantially live, except for the vocals. And the day before we're to go into the studio, Meat Loaf comes to me and says, I don't think my label understands me. I want off. And so he essentially called his label and said, drop me from the label. And they knew how much money he was going to spend on the record. And they said, gladly. And so I had to pay to have the record made. And for 6 months after the record was made, I was still holding the bag for it because they hadn't found a label. Bearsville, the studio that we recorded it in, I gave them the right of first refusal on the record, and they didn't want it. And neither did Warner Brothers, who was distributing Bearsville. And it took them 6 months to find a label that would even put the record out. They found this tiny label called Cleveland International, distributed by Columbia Records or Epic Records or something like that at the time. And it was just one guy. His name was Steve Popovich, Cleveland International Records. He had one other artist that was Ian Hunter. And so Meat Loaf became instantly his premier artist, and he promoted the crap out of him and wouldn't give up. The first single didn't go anywhere. Second single didn't go anywhere. Finally, the third single, everything started to click at that point. Meat Loaf was on MTV because very few people made videos for a brand new MTV. and the DJs on MTV were just like DJs everywhere. They wanted to play the longest song they could so they get the roof, go up on the roof and get high while it was playing. So they could like play Paradise by the Dashboard Light once an hour on MTV, and that's when things started to break.
That's because they didn't have a video for Inagata Davida, I guess. Todd Rundgren is here of Utopia, of Todd Rundgren MeWe is playing at the Appell Center on Sunday night for my birthday and Sammy Hagar and Jim Palmer's birthday. He'll be there on Sunday night after the Ravens Commanders game. Get on up to York, see Todd. So I have all sorts of things that I have to get to. Global Nation TV. Let's start with that, Todd, and we'll get to the show that you're putting on. I have fast and furious questions from the great Clark Judge, who is a Todd is God guy. So let's talk about your right now what you're doing. Global Nation TV, the important thing for you, right?
Well, it's globalnation.tv, it's like .com, and if you do .com, you'll just go to Global Nation TV. Back in the 90s, I started a thing called Patronet when the internet was kind of a new thing. And I thought, why don't we remove the middleman in the music business, that being the label? I'll go directly to my fans and get them to underwrite what I do. And now that's a fairly common thing, but in those days, nobody had thought to try that. So I started a project called Patronet, and I got about 5,000 subscribers. But it was so early in the sort of the life of the internet that things kept changing. Like every couple of months there would be a different browser, and there were no standards. It was just technologically kind of maddening. And after a while, I kind of collapsed because I couldn't do all the programming and make music at the same time. So when COVID came around and I had nothing to do, I thought, why don't I try and revive this? Since everybody's at home anyway, this is a way that they can, find find musicians and other creators and enjoy whatever it is they do. So I restarted it. In the meantime, a thing called Patreon had come along and done kind of the same thing that Patronet was doing, but we didn't want to start out with a lawsuit. So we changed the name to Global Nation. And so if you go to Global Nation TV, it'll explain all about it, but it's a place where anyone can start to create a space of their own and share it with other people and potentially build a subscriber base so that they will support what you do directly.
All right, so Clark Judge is a Hall of Fame football voter. He's been my friend for 30 years. He's been your fan for longer than that. So I have questions straight from his list. First of all, what do you think about Bang the Drum serving as a touchdown anthem at NFL games like in Green Bay? In what universe did you foresee that happening?
Well, in no universe did anyone foresee that, but strange things happen. I believe it started out the first kind of sporting events that Bang the Drum gained any toehold was hockey games, and people would start singing at hockey games, and then it kind of spread to football. But the weird thing is, most people never knew that it was my song or that I was doing the original performance. The label at the time, it was on a record called the ever popular Tortured Artist Effect. And it was a protest record on my part, and the label didn't promote it very much. And they certainly didn't think to release Bang the Drum as a single. But then suddenly AM radio started using it as a Friday drive time song, play it every Friday. Uh, and I think people liked it because of the line about, assaulting your boss. And so, because people by Friday are all fed up.
And
So
that was right after 9 to 5 and Lily Tomlin and Dolly
yeah,
Parton too, right?
yeah, you can play that as a block. And so it became popular on radio because of that. It would be a Friday drive time staple. And in the end, it became the most financially rewarding song that I ever dreamed and then transcribed, because I never thought the song up. It was a song that came to me in a dream. I woke myself up and recorded what I could remember of it, and that became the song. It didn't make any sense to me at the time. It's like, why are you why are you doing this? But I had the song in my head, and I figured I better do it. And in the long run, by the time we got to the late 80s and the 90s, I was getting like six-figure offers from Carnival Cruise Lines to use the song. And it became like my greatest source of income in some years, just making deals for that song for things like commercials and movies and stuff like that. So I've always seen the song as some kind of mystical gift that was bestowed on me that I didn't know the meaning of or the scope of when it was done. But in the long run, I've made well into seven figures just from that one song being licensed, because it seems to represent to people just a good time and abandon and forget about everything, get drunk and take your shirt off. Yeah.
More from the Clark Judge questions. You have numerous celebrated LPs, including Something Anything, A Wizard, a True Star, Hermit of Mink Hollow, Acapella, Nearly Human. But he has a friend who's been to over 100 of your shows, Todd, who says that The Ballad of Todd Rundgren is the best album ever made. What's your favorite LP and why?
Well, these are the questions that I normally refuse to answer. And that's because as soon as you come up with an answer, you suddenly remember a different thing. You say, "Oh no, wait."
Depends what day I ask you.
It's like, no, wait, that wasn't the one. It was this other one here. I mean, it's usually the thing that you're working on currently, because that's where your focus is. Um, I I was still a very young artist when I did like the Ballad of Todd Rundgren, and it was right after I discovered marijuana, and my mind was evolving into a different place, and I started writing songs from a different place, and it turned out to be a little more coherent, I guess, than my first album. And the songs are all fairly accessible. A lot of ballads, if you like ballads. That's why it was called the Ballad of Todd Rundgren. Some people prefer my ballads, even though I started out just as a guitar player and still enjoy playing the guitar. But was fairly new as a songwriter and still trying to find some discipline. Um, by the time I got to my third album, songs that I was writing, the kind of songs that I was writing for the ballad album, just started spilling out in like 20-minute spurts. I saw the light, I wrote in less than 20 minutes. Um, and after I had done that, I thought, it's not supposed to work that way.
Not that
I'm
easy every day, right?
No, it's not supposed to be that way. I'm not on Tin Pan Alley. I'm not like, ready, give me a bouncy C, Moon, June, Spoon. it's it's supposed to be, a little bit more work than that. So after that, I just took a whole different path as a musician and did only the things that I thought nobody else would do, including myself. So it's just been a long, kind of bizarre adventure for my fans, for the people who paid attention anyway. From then until now, it's never the same thing twice.
That is the beauty of Todd Rundgren. Hall of Famer, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Todd Rundgren is our guest. He will be playing the Appell Center for my birthday. I may have stayed till midnight just to celebrate. Sunday night, the 13th, lucky 13. Come on up to York, Pennsylvania and check him out. You've been through Baltimore so many times. And so the show, I've taken a look at little pieces of it. It's a little bit of everything, right? I mean, it's you've pieced together what you're loving to play right now, right? You've been out a lot. You've been out the last 6 months, 2 months on, 2 months off, but you're playing a lot of shows, Todd.
We've done a few so far. I tend to stay busy. If I'm not doing my own show, I'm doing tribute to the Beatles or David Bowie. Next year, we're trying to get a Burt Bacharach estate sanctioned tribute tour. So that would be fun for me because Burt Bacharach was an early songwriting influence, and unfortunately, I never got to meet him. The irony being that we played a show in Southern California, and someone told me after the show, Burt Bacharach came in to see you play. And his commentary was, and I was doing what we call an unpredictable evening, which is a weird combination of songs of my own and songs that maybe haven't been played in a very long time. Things like, Melanie's roller skate song or don't bogart that joint. Things, just any odd song that we would work out, and I wouldn't tell the band what was next. So a very unpredictable evening, and he happened to have come to see the show then, and then he wanted to hear me sing "Hello, It's Me," and I didn't include it in the show that night. If I had known he had been there, I definitely would have done it. But
That's a heavy burden to have disappointed Burt Bacharach in that fashion, Todd.
yeah, and that was unfortunately I didn't hear until after he had after the show was over and he had left. So and now it's too late for me to play it for Bert.
Well, you know what? What the world needs now is love, sweet love. So I want to get on the way out of here because you've been more than generous with your time, even though your hair wasn't done, did. Spirit of Harmony. Let's talk about that a little bit because I think that's your legacy foundation. Amongst all the music and the banging on the drum and Hello, It's Me and all that, this is something that is really important to you, right?
It certainly is, and it's not the kind of thing I would have done by myself. It was really at the encouragement of my fans. Um, and they do a lot of the support work to keep it going. It's something that we kind of do together. Um, I used to do these yearly retreats with my fans. It would usually be on my birthday. And one year we were at a plantation outside of New Orleans. And the fans decided this was shortly after the hurricane, and fans decided they want to do something, maybe help a music program in the New Orleans area. So we found a program in the lower ninth ward, and it was all nothing but strings, kids from like elementary school age up through high school, but it was all violins and violas and double basses and stuff. And they played the Saints Go Marching In for us and stuff, which is kind of weird on nothing but strings. But fans got together, they found this program, they collected money amongst themselves. And we went down and saw them play for us. And then we presented them with a big novelty check for $10,000. And the fans enjoyed the experience so much, they said, we have to make this like a regular thing. And that's when we started the Spirit of Harmony. And the Spirit of Harmony, we don't do that kind of thing. We don't collect a bunch of money and then just hand it to somebody and say, you figure out how to spend it. Instead, we decided we're going to be the eHarmony of music programs, and we'll find, just say, a program in a school that's struggling and they can't find instruments, so they need support somehow, and we connect them with musical instrument companies, or we have music instrument drives where we take old instruments that people aren't playing anymore and we get them refurbished and then we bestow them on some program. But in that sense, money never changes hands. We just connect people together. We connect groups with other sorts of supporters. We have a whole kit. If you wanted to try to start a music program in your area, ideally in a public school, because what really inspired us was the fact that we all grew up with music programs in our schools, and now schools don't have music programs because they think they can't afford them. So we gathered the research and discovered that it's really important for young people to learn about music, to get a little bit of formal music training because it changes the way that they process sound for the rest of their lives. Makes it easier for them to focus on someone's voice, and therefore will help them whatever other educational things they do. And if they never become a musician, they still will have those benefits that they gained when they were young by being involved in a music program. So that's our modus operandi and our goal to get music back into public schools. And anybody who wants to do that, we're here to help them.
We'll send everybody out to Todd Rundgren's website. You can learn about Spirit of Harmony. You can learn about globalnation.tv and all the works of the great Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Todd Rundgren. Last question on the way out the door, because Clark Judge has this here. One song here that you haven't played, Hope I'm Around. Just wondering if you're ever going to play it and why not.
Well, there's a whole lot of songs that I don't play. And I may have played it at one point back when I first composed it. But you usually tend to play the stuff that you've written most recently. So I'm not saying I would never play it, but I don't know what the circumstance is that would have me focus on that, unless I was to reproduce the whole album, which I've done on occasion. I've done things where we do an album from beginning to end, or a couple of albums, and I don't want to disappoint anyone, but I'm never doing a Wizard of True Star again live. There's too many costume changes. So, yeah.
You're getting too old for that.
Yeah.
Todd, thank you for your time. I hope everybody comes up on Sunday. I've always wanted to have you on. Thanks for making a bucket list event for me happen and being such great company. And I'm very, very grateful that I found that live from Daryl's house that created this thing. And if I ever have a tiki with you, I want to do it on Kauai. I mean, no offense to York, Pennsylvania, but I'm coming to Kauai to look you guys up. So I appreciate
Okay,
it.
give us a little warning, and we'll make the way for you.
I appreciate that. Todd Rundgren, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. Go see him at the Appell Center on Sunday night, the 13th of October. And if you're listening to this afterward, I'm sure you got some great information if you're a Utopia or Todd Rundgren lifer fan. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking rock and roll with my hair out and Baltimore positive here. Stay with us.